The ECM-519 is a 500 series FET-based compressor. The really cool thing about using FETs as a compression device, as a gain reduction device, is that they add a lot of musical distortion when they're pushed. So you'll notice the controls on ours are laid out similar to an 1176 in that there's no threshold control, so the amount of compression is done by adjusting the input and output. So as you turn up the input, you're going to be compressing the signal more, but also at the same time, the FET's going to be pushed a little harder and you're going to get a little bit more distortion. The cool thing is this distortion tends to be even harmonic distortion, which is typically really musical, as opposed to IMD distortion, which is intermodulation distortion, which you get from a lot of VCAs, which tends to not sound as good on a lot of sources. So if you want to do only a little bit of transparent compression, you won't be hitting the FET really hard, and it will stay pretty transparent. But if you really want to slam something and you sort of crank the input up, the FET's going to be seeing a lot more level, and the cool thing is that you're going to be adding a lot of harmonic distortion, which is going to make the signal sound a little bit more present, a little brighter. So in that sort of situation, if it was, say, a rock vocal, it would kind of stay really in your face, doing a lot of high compression amounts. The first switch on the upper left is the transformer switching control. On this unit, we've made the output section so you can switch between an electronically balanced output or a transformer balanced output. The cool thing is that it allows you to instantly sort of add a little bit of vintage vibe. With the transformer in, you kind of lose a little bit of that sub or bottom octave, but the lows and low mids tend to thicken up a bit with it in, and the top gets just ever so slightly rounded off. We've also added a loaded setting, which is the same transformer but with additional loading on the output, and this makes the low end really distorted depending where you have the output set, and the top end sort of really rounds off. This setting works really great actually on room mics where you might have more cymbals than you'd want. It kind of adds a bit of dampening to those signals without really sounding like EQ or sounding like sort of de-essing. So it's sort of a really musical setting. Here we've got it dialed in with no gain reduction so you can hear what's going on. You'll notice in the loaded setting that the transients are still there from the kick and snare, but the cymbals definitely get quite a bit darker, which is a really cool feature that I don't think you can see in a lot of other units. The unit has a high pass control for the sidechain, so this allows you to high pass the signal before it hits the compressor. So on something like a drum bus or a bass, if you wanted to key less off the low frequency information, you can engage the high pass at either 120 or 240. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like on the drum bus. So you notice the low end just kind of breathes a little more with it on, especially with those attack and release settings. The attack and release on this compressor are a little bit faster than you'll find on the average on most compressors out there. This was done on purpose. I've always found that that's one place where plugins really fall short is with the faster time constants, especially doing large amounts of gain reduction. So we wanted to make sure we really nailed that in this unit. The other cool thing is that you'll notice that the attack and release controls are really smooth. There's not one section of the knob where all the action happens like you'll find on some other units. Let's have a listen with a snare drum so you can kind of get an idea of the timing. You'll notice that even with the fast transient on the snare, at the fastest attack setting, you're basically able to eat it and eliminate it, and pretty musically. An alternative to the manual attack and release are the auto modes. The auto modes are a feature that's pretty unique to this compressor. It's actually a completely separate sidechain, and it's actually two completely separate sidechains that run in parallel. So one set up at faster time constants and a higher threshold that sort of digs into peaks a little bit faster and gets out of the way a little bit faster. And the second side chain is set up with slower time constants at a slightly lower threshold. So it's meant to smooth things out. I used to record a lot of the time vocals with an 1176 in series with an LA2A. The 1176 sort of grabbing the big dynamics and the LA2A sort of providing a final smoothing. So the auto modes are sort of set up with that same idea. They tend to be really musical, and it's kind of hard to ruin a signal with them. So let's have a listen to what they sound like on an acoustic guitar track. So you'll notice that we went to Auto 2 first, and it was really musical. On a source like that, it's kind of tough, and it sounds pretty bad pretty quickly with a lot of compressors. But on that, it kind of grabs it and releases in a really musical way, and you don't hear it pumping too much. When we went to Auto 1, Auto 1 has a faster attack compared to Auto 2, so we heard it pumping a bit, especially on the transients. Auto 1's really great on a source like an electric rhythm guitar that you want to sort of put it on and do 6 or 8 dB of reduction and sort of place it in the mix, and it won't poke out, and you won't probably have to ride it that much, and it'll hold it sort of in place within the mix in a really musical way. Auto 2 is a little bit more open, so I really like it in situations where you might just want to provide a little bit of final smoothing on a vocal at mix time. Another convenient feature of the compressor is the mix control. What I've got set up right now is the drum bus, and I've got really slam setting dialed in. So I'm going to show you the bypass signal, I'm going to play the slam setting, and then I'm going to blend the mix back to get a good blend between the original and the slam signal, which is sort of a very useful case in most mixes. So there's an example of how you can take something that sounds way too compressed on its own, but by blending a bit in, it really gives the original a lot of character. Another cool feature with the ECM-519 is its ability to link in stereo. This is traditionally a tough thing with FET compressors because FETs have such a wide variance from unit to unit. We were able to do this because we basically wrote or created a test apparatus which individually tests the FETs at numerous bias points, and then we test hundreds of them, and we throw out about 85%, and we take the final 15% which match really closely, and we use them in the final production units. So right now I've got a mix queued up. Let's just have a listen. You'll notice that when we engage the unit that you don't end up with any stereo image shift, and the units link up really nicely. People always ask if this unit is like an 1176, and in some ways it's similar because of the control set, the set threshold, and it uses a FET, but everything else about it is completely different. It's an original design and topology. Obviously, I've used the 1176 a lot over the years, so I've been influenced by its sound, but we really built something from the ground up here. With this unit, I think the best part about it is that you can dial in subtle enhancements really quickly in a session. The transformer, the high pass, and the auto modes are all available at the flick of a switch. So if you need to work fast, this unit is great for that, and it sounds great on a lot of different sources. Please go on YouTube and check out the rest of our videos. We have the unit showcased on a lot of different sources, so you can really hear what it does.